All right, so again, thanks everyone for coming. I'm very excited to present the work of Valentina Soto tonight at Venture Cafe. Valentina was born in Santiago, Chile, and now resides in the United States. Her work interrogates the political and aesthetic compositions of the natural and the exotic. Valentina graduated with her bachelor's degree from the University of Chile and her Master of Fine Arts from the University of Pennsylvania. So tonight she'll be presenting a project that she completed during a recent residency at the artist-run gallery space called Grizzly Grizzly in Philadelphia. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Valentina.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. And thanks for the intro, Angela. I'm gonna, please let me know if, because I have a window open, so if there's too much noise from the background, please let me know, or if you, or anything. So I thought about okay, first of all, this is my background that you've been mentioned, some of you have. This is a collage of colonial imagery, which has informed my work for the past year, I think I could say, and that I'll talk about throughout the presentation. So I wanted to go ahead and share my screen with you all. So this is the work that I eventually ended up doing at the space of Grizzly Grizzly during the month of February, between February and March. And this is the result that I feel was very, I don't know, it was very telling in a way of like how artists, I know a lot of artists work this way, but especially I feel I usually work with trial and error. And that's also why it has been so hard for me for the past year because of the pandemic to keep working in my practice, because I really need a studio to be trying out materials. So I wanted to give an introduction of my work and I guess like go through like, I feel the genesis at least of what researching right now, which is also a piece, also to contextualize everything. This is a piece, this fountain piece is a work that's gonna be shown in a month from now at the space of Icebox, which is at Fine Arts here in Philadelphia. And it is also the show after the 2-year program MFA at UPenn. Because it was supposed to happen last year, and because of the pandemic, it was pushed to this year. So sorry that long introduction, but so this is a work titled Tropic, Jeve as well. Jeve means rubber in Spanish, but specifically in Spanish in Colombia. This work was made in 2016 after a residency I did in Colombia for 3 months. While I was in like visiting, or that I became interested in colonial expeditions, because Colombia was a territory that has this huge botanical expedition that was made throughout I believe it was like during the 18th century, because Colombia was such a rich territory in flora and fauna that they like put a lot of money into these expeditions. So I was like looking at that, but at the same time, I was living in this very industrial neighborhood in Bogota. So and it was also my first time going to Colombia, coming from Chile, that is also a very, specifically Santiago, like very industrial city. So it was interesting for me to also like be a foreigner that expected like a very exotic image, and then to be confronted with this totally like different or opposed conception that I had in my mind. And also, I was very interested in the stories of exploitation of natural resources in Colombia, specifically the banana exportation, and also the rubber fever. Two main industries throughout the 20th century that caused a lot of exploitation, death, and also like people exporting these natural resources. And so this is how this piece comes through through this ominous image of recycled rubber leaves of banana leaves. So I was interested in opposing these two ideas, but also thinking about like how do you say this? Like typical imagery, or even like the cliche of the tropical, and how can you subvert it, or how to like give it a spin in this like rarefied environment, in this by juxtaposing both materials. And at the same time, this whole research of rubber was also like very, I don't know, I had an image of wanting to do like this rubber leaves, and then I didn't know how to do them, so it finally got me to like an industry in Santiago that was very far away. Long story short, it's sort of also like the process between like working with materials and working through an idea as an artist that I feel was like very informing for my practice as well. And with this piece, I also presented, it was the first time I worked with clay and ceramics, and this was this piece called Samples of New Grenade. The gallery where this was showcased also has a very, as you can see, like a very large window. And I also thought of the parallel between the expeditions that I was seeing and that I was researching, the natural expeditions of the discovery of America, and also my own experience going to this residency, and also like the idea of objectivity and subjectivity. So here there was this different pieces that my idea was to actually subvert or push the idea of the objective based on natural textures. I exaggerated different pieces or textures or forms, giving like this hybrid sort of recollections of pieces, and also showcasing them, much in the way of how colonial expeditions worked. That they would usually like extract everything from the land and then like bring it back to Europe and showcase them. And at the same time, I was this was sort of this was also the first time I became interested in the material of unfired clay. For people who have never worked with clay, usually clay, when it dries up and before you fire it in the kiln, if you put water again, it will dissolve, and it can be clay forever and ever. It goes through that process of drying and then like putting water again until you fire it. And once you fire it in the kiln, it has a set shape. And so some of the pieces, actually, because I ran out of time, I had to present them in this state of unfired clay, which is also the most fragile and delicate state, where you like, the pieces were very hard to move. I actually like bubble wrapped them like 10 times. And my professor, my ceramics professor, was also against of me showing these pieces. because she told me like, no, maybe like save this on fire clay pieces for a next show. And I felt that was also interesting to like push the limits of said discipline or said material, and at the same time, sort of a counterpoint between this heavy recycled clay, probably recycled, this heavy recycled rubber leaves that were in the same room, a material that takes thousands and thousands of years to decompose, versus these unfair clay pieces that if you pour water on them, they will dissolve. And sort of this kept going with this other piece where I was part of this interdisciplinary project where we visited industrial ruins throughout Chile that are usually left abandoned because they become obsolete. And so I was part of, I was contributing as an artist, and I also felt, so I was confronted with a bunch of industrial rubble, and the operation that I did here was a copy, an almost one-on-one copy of these different details that I photographed, and then like I copied them in unfired clay. So you can see different pieces of bricks here, or of different electrical pieces of like industries that I exposed as an as objects like archaeological site. But at the same time, I felt this piece was too aesthetic, and except for this one, which is one of the, I reproduced, this was the larger piece that I reproduced in unfired clay. It was part of electrical engine that we found in one of the sites. And I showed it in unfired clay, in wet unfired clay. And so as the show went on for a month, it dried up and started to crumble. And I thought that was also something that was happening and that was like active, and that I couldn't really control a lot of what was happening, which was what ignited my interest in this material as well. So this is one of the first exercises once I came to the program in 2018, once I came to the program at the MFA at Penn. And this was a series of different unfired clay and porcelain bowls. And basically the piece started when people, like 5 minutes before everyone entered the room, I filled up every single bowl with water up to the brim. And then people entered the room. And so they slowly or rapidly or dramatically or very subtle, they started to dissolve. And this was, again, like I felt there was something of uncontrolled in this, that I was very interested, that even ignited my own interest in keeping researching this material, even though I didn't know what the representation of the clay would be, what shapes I was interested in. I was interested still in images of colonization through natural resources, through the landscape and flora and fauna, but I still was unsure of what to portray. And this is also trying to expand the places into where to set up this operation of unfired clay. And this is at the University of Pennsylvania. This is the greenhouses that they have there. And this is right next to a pond that they have. And so I was interested also in the artificial, like how to create the spaces that seem natural, how to recreate them, but also like showing their artifice. And at the same time, the shapes that are represented in unfired clay corresponds to plants that are planted seasonally in most parks or that are used in landscaping that serve a seasonal purpose, and are plants that usually originally come from other regions of the world, such as Asia or Africa. So here I was the one igniting the water, and also thinking how this was part of a performance series that we did. So I was also thinking how, because I always felt very uncomfortable with me igniting the fountain, because I never resolved how my body entered the piece. So that was also other things that I was thinking about at the time. And this takes me to this piece, which is called Fragile Natural History of the West Indies. Sorry. This was, so this is also sort of from where my fountain piece comes from. So I stumbled upon this book, which is Natural History of the West Indies, written by Fernando González de Oviedo. And this is where the shapes come from. And this is where my sort of two interests, which was a material interest and then the representational interest or research or more research interest, like came together. And this is all, again, I built a system of destruction in a sense with this DIY rain water collectors, in which when I ignited the water, when I turned on the faucet, water started dripping. And so the pieces slowly dissolved or rapidly. And again, there was this choreography setting up in which I didn't know really what piece was going to fall first or in what way were they dissolving. But again, I was part of the piece Ignite. I had to be there to ignite the piece, and I still didn't feel that was still not, I was not interested in that. With sort of, wait, can you show me? Sorry. So here I wanted to show where the research comes from. This is the book that I was telling you about. This is one of the chroniclers, because there's a lot of different chronicles from the discovery of America, from the period of the conquest, from the 16th century. But this book for me is very important and becomes interested. I'm interested in this book in my research because it's the first book that pretends to be a sort of encyclopedia of everything that was found in America and how to use them, how to use it as well. It goes through animal, plants, geography, and even the people that were living, and sort of trying to have a exhaustive description of everything that was in the land, but also from the point of view of someone that had lived in America. Specifically, Gonzalo Fernández Oviedo lived in Santo Domingo, and then he wrote this book back in Spain. So he wrote the book from memory, which is also something interesting to think about when we're like talking about now with the distance of time, what does it mean to write something from memory? Now we find it very subjective and tricky, but at the time it was the most objective way of describing or of knowing something, to experience it. And I'm not only interested in the descriptions of the book, but also the illustrations of the book. For example, this is the first pineapple representation that was supposedly seen in Europe, that circulated. So I'm also interested in this images, which is, again, what I have in my background, and how not only how these images function, which were originally woodcuts. That's why you see the more like diagram form of each shape, but also how they change throughout different editions of the book. Because if you see here on the left, this is a sketch from Oviedo, which was, again, he wasn't an artist. It's a very basic illustration. And then you see on the right an eventual edition made by another person based on the drawing. So you see, like, it's also the layers of history that come from these images. So here it's I'm interested especially in the images of plants, because that's my research, basically, and of natural resources. Again, this book as sort of like the first step on this process of colonization of the territory, the first step of commodifying what was on the land. And so these are images of the fountain that I started building at Grizzly. So again, my idea, this is also getting into more technicality of sculpture. My idea always was to build this fountain without a structure to support it, but it proves to be very hard to not have a structure that supports clay. So this is sort of the first try of building this fountain, which is the foam material for building and then carving it to a specific shape, and then putting clay on top of it. And then you can see the pump is already installed. And this is all the shapes, sort of like, this is sort of a collage. It's interesting. It's funny now that I think about it, because it's sort of like the same operation that you see in my background, like a collage of the different figures, but here done in a 3D model. And here's the dry piece. So I did this like, I think a weekend or a Monday I finished with all the clay, and then on Tuesday I went, or Monday, wanting to turn on the pump and start to dissolve the clay, but for like gravity reasons, or because I wasn't as thorough to see that there was like a balance between the weights that was supporting this structure, it started to dry up. And so this is what it eventually happened with the fountain. So I started to listen to it like moving. I started to listen to cracking up, and I was like, this is gonna fall. So thankfully I had my phone near me, which is, again, trial and error of building things. Evidently the foam structurally is not as heavy for it to withhold all the clay that I intend to put it. But at the same time, I don't know, I was looking at this, I was doing the presentation, I was looking at this piece, and I was also thinking, like, this could be a piece because it's also a destruction of this imagery. But then I still wanted to try how it will look like with the dissolving water. So I just scraped the half that broke, and then was making the water circulate through the fountain. Also making a simile, again, the part of the dissolution is how I'm making this colonial imagery, reproducing the already colonial imagery to then dissolve it. And so my idea of the fountain is to take myself out of the equation, as I was saying before. I never felt that was necessary, so I always wanted it to be a system by itself, a system of destruction by itself, which I feel the fountain makes sense. Also because it ties onto like usually how flora and fauna motifs are used in fountains, in public sculptures. But I usually used as a background. So I'm also interested in seeing this pushed in the forefront, or a fountain that only has that. And then you can see the destruction at the same time. And then this is, so I let it go for a while, and then you can see how the pieces slowly start dissolving, but then moments like this happen in which a whole piece of the fountain will drop to the floor. So I'm also, I mean, people that have seen my work in person will know that that's also part of the attention in it, that sometimes it has subtle moments and sometimes it has dramatic moments, and I can't really, so it becomes like a choreography that I can't really control, which I guess it's also part of the piece, the sense of control, because everything I feel springs from that idea of wanting to control nature, and at the same time, the fountain, if we go to the history of fountains, fountains arise of trying from how do you say, like delivery system of water. Their genesis is to get water, but then they develop into a system, into a more decorative system, in which the delivery becomes more, there's more emphasis in the aesthetics of fountains, but at the same time, fountains become this way of controlling water, of controlling nature, and if we think about it, and also an expression of power in society of this very large decorative fountains. So I'm also interested in that shape. And lastly, also, I mean, I know this is like very far-fetched, but thinking about iconography, or like tearing down iconography, or like questioning iconography, throughout the last 2 years, that we've seen a lot of monuments and public, the public space has becomes very charged, and the ways of bringing down iconography. And I feel like, at least from back home in Chile, since 2019, in the social protests that have been going on in Chile, one of my favorite things to watch in the media were expressions of this, expressions into the public sphere, specifically in public monuments. For example, so I could hear the Caupolicán statue, which was an indigenous fighter back in the history in Chile, and so Diego Portales is one of the, it's a Spanish conqueror that is also like very important in Chile, but so the protesters torn down the Diego Portales head from a statue and put it at the feet of the Caupolicán statue. We see also with the Black Lives Matter movement, we also saw the Rizzo statue finally got like torn down from its place, and at the same time the monument in Baquedano in Santiago, it has become such a charged political space that I also feel like, even though I'm not addressing that in a direct way, I feel it's also part of the imagery that I'm seeing, or the imagery that has informed this fountain piece in a way. And that's also one of the things that I'm thinking about now as well, because I feel I have sort of directed all my energy into seeing how it works sculpturally and how it can function and everything. And now I'm thinking, once it's made, also the place in which makes more sense for it to live. Like maybe it makes more sense outside as well, or in other places. What does it mean to put this fountain in other places? What does it mean for other contexts? Also thinking that I'm not from the US, and thinking that maybe this iconography is better identified in other places. Yeah, and I also wanted to end with this sort of images, hopefully in a sense of thinking. I mean, I know there's a lot of pieces out there speaking about this, and we have a monument lab here in Philadelphia that also deals with all this imagery and processes. So yeah, that's it for me. I thank you for listening, and I don't know, I mean, I would love if anyone has comments or questions, or sorry if anything was confusing. In my mind it all makes sense, but
That was great, Valentina. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. If anyone has any questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself or type them in the chat.
I had a question in terms of how you were feeling about letting your work go. Like, this is your baby and you've crafted this, and but part of the work is the destruction of it. And so I'd love to understand kind of your thought process and, you know, how you felt about that journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Thanks for asking that. I feel it's, yeah, it's sort of a running joke in my program. I feel like, oh, there's Valentina, she's gonna destroy her work, which is true. I don't. One of the explanations I have and I could give for that is when I moved here, I was packaging my studio, and I felt so anxious about all the things that I have, all the like previous work that I have and that are stored. And I guess it's also like sort of a generational feeling of getting very anxious with how many things we have, and about capitalism. And I guess one of my answers for that was to make work to destroy it in a sense. Mm-hmm. And I also feel there's something about not only its destruction, but of watching the destruction that really interests me. How is this dissolution, I guess, which I've been investigating with clay, but I hope in the future to be able to see it with other materials as well. And it's interesting. I mean, what you were saying, like, it is my creation or my baby, but at the same time it feels even like, I don't know, I don't want to like get too psychoanalytical, because I feel like I sort of push from that, but I do get a sense of like how do you say, like catharsis when the work is destroyed.
Right.
Of like letting go. I guess it also comes from this idea of control, the letting go of it.
And it's your vision for it. So like it's probably me more putting judgment on like it's beautiful. How can you, how can you let it go? But the reality is that's the process. Like
Yeah.
that is the piece, like in the fulfillment of your vision for the piece.
No, but of course, I mean, it was part of the discussion throughout the program as well, of like creating these things that actually take time to create and then to destroy it. There's also, I mean, there is literature through that as well, of like the art in itself. It's also this very meaningless thing that we're like spending time for, and then for what? Yeah.
Valentina, I am so excited about your work. So I have a number of comments and happy to continue the conversation afterwards too. And of course, I have a question. As soon as you showed the fountain cracking, I immediately saw these images of the monuments toppling. So I think that the iconography, the process is absolutely there. It absolutely seems like there's such a different process where you are allowing the fountain to dissolve versus where it topples. And maybe it's this difference of like resistance versus oppositionality. But I think that's a big discussion. I love that your work seems to be dealing with the themes of inexhaustibility and the exhaustibility of capitalism, and just how there's this assumption that with capitalism there is this endless extraction of a resource. And I love how like the fountain, if it's designed properly, it can just keep recycling the water in and out, and you're absolutely short-circuiting that. So you're really showing the exhaustibility of these resources, or perhaps of capitalism itself. And so I find that incredibly exciting and rich. Also, the fact that you're using unfired clay is so exciting. I think a lot about how when clay is fired, it takes on that stable form, as you mentioned. And so I love the fact that you are really pausing before the form really takes shape to perhaps think about the exhaustibility of that form, but then the pliability and the potential of it. So all of these things are just so exciting to me. So I'm really curious as to, what you hope to explore next. And also, I'm just so struck by you saying how you wanted to take yourself out from the, as you called, igniting the fountain, which I really also love, because in your kind of like really wonderful description of it, there's this like super sensory quality of the mixing of the fire destruction element and the water. And so I'm curious about if you could maybe riff a little bit on that, as to why it was so important for you to take yourself out of the process of destruction.
I mean, I feel like I don't have like a very theoretical explanation for this. It's more of a gut feeling. And it's also because I had this amazing class at Penn, which is performance with Sharon Hayes, which is the most amazing person to learn performance from. And it sort of made sense. And I guess it's more about interests. When you realize what you're interested in, I felt like I was interested after taking that class, and in the middle of that class, I realized I was more interested in seeing the objects perform and not myself perform. It was more of me not knowing how to make my body make sense in that performance. That I was seeing that my my fellow classmates were making sense of. I felt more that I was accidental, that I was, that the sense of into me doing that, being in the ignition was more of a cop-out in a sense of like, I don't know what else to do to make this ignite itself, so whatever, I'll use me. But I felt it didn't, in that sense, it didn't click for me. It wasn't more, yeah, I don't know, because I was like, maybe I was projecting, but I was thinking about like me not wanting to destroy things or something like that. But it was more of like me wanting to see the destruction, to be sort of like, I want to be the public of this. I don't want to be like behind the scene of this, because I also want to see what's happening. And sorry, what are the other, because I feel you said two questions. Like
Well, I shared a lot of just comments and just
thank you
points
for
of
that.
excitement. So I'm curious. Yeah, I'm just really curious about the next step. So, and I see that Ephraim has a question too.
Yeah, I actually wanted to follow up on that because this is just, it's really fascinating, this idea of either wanting or not wanting to be sort of physically present in the work, or I should say visibly present in the work, because obviously you're physically present in the work, but wanting to almost be an observer of what you've done rather than like directly part of it in a performative way. And I think a lot of people definitely struggle with that. I feel like it ties into your research, the way that you are also observing history, you know, and you're not necessarily intervening per se, you're almost looking at it in a very sort of neutral way and presenting it. I mean, I think we all see the fallibility and the problem in what you're presenting, but you also sort of remove yourself to it from an extent. And I think it, just the idea of these works being autonomous in a way gives them so much more power. Even that moment in which it's standing and then it falls, and we all sort of chuckle, but the reason why I know I chuckle is because it's profound. It's uncanny the way this thing has this like little life that took place over a very short period of time that you were sort of allowing to happen. Because we have to realize, you know, you're allowing this for happening, because you could intervene and make this in parts and fire it and put it together in such a way that it will last for thousands of years. But you've clearly chosen not to. And I just find that to be incredibly exciting. And I also, I have one last thing to say before you can talk about the things that you're going to move on to, that I know Roxana wants to hear about too, is I'm a huge fan of Robert Smithson, and I sort of learned about entropy through reading about him, and, or I should say reading his writings and thinking about the decay of things and physics and and just the way things work, I guess. And I felt like there was something that was always inherently political to that, the idea of making work that was in the wind, you know, that wasn't going to last, that was specifically counteracting the sort of needs of capitalism, which is to make things permanent and in terms of being part of the monetary system. So I find this act of yours to be very political, layered on top of the already very political observations that you're making. And I think that it's that layering that makes your work so intriguing to me. So thanks for that.
Thank you. It's interesting though how, because I've also obviously been looking at and reading Robert Smithson for the past years, but it's interesting to also see how his works have been like preserved through time, and also like land art in general.
It's funny the way that people have it almost like a vain way, try to, like they've even rebuilt some of his work.
Yeah, I know.
To preserve it because people are they're just desperate to preserve the value.
I mean, yeah, it's also obviously the market and how those works are reabsorbed now into, yeah, that's a whole other discussion. I have like
I'd love to have it sometime.
many things to say about land art, which I struggle with now in 2021. But I feel that the next steps of my work that I'm trying to is how to research other materials that can give me the same. No, I don't want to say the same because it becomes formulaic then, and I'm not interested in it being like a formula, but I guess researching materials that can have histories like that, or thinking more through materials, how they have their logic, I guess, being more conscious of it. And yeah, I'm currently working in this project. To be more specific, sorry, I'm currently working on this fountain project, and then at the same time I'm working with a project with a case that's called the Warden case, that was used to transport plants throughout the 18th century, and that allowed biopiracy and plants that actually we use nowadays. It was thanks for it was the result of the invention of this case, but at the same time, the case in itself didn't survive time. It's an object that it's not like there's, I think, 4 of them in museums worldwide, because they were usually destroyed because they transported pests. So I'm also now, I guess, interested in this object that we don't have a lot of information about, and that was destroyed at the same time. And what does it mean trying to look through histories? And I think that's also what is happening right now in research in general. How are we questioning history, but at the same time, how do we find this history that is not written down, I guess?
I have a question for you. So I know you're trying to figure out like new materials, and this discussion about land art kind of got me thinking, have you ever thought about using like living materials, or actually using like plants themselves, because they also go through this process of decay,
Yeah, I have been trying to use plants, but I have been trying to use plants in a way, and one of my projects that didn't work out was based in that. But it's also, it's tricky. I feel like from a time from now, I feel like also using plants in art and in shows and in exhibitions became like very trendy. So I feel like maybe it's stupid to talk about this, but maybe, or sorry to put it in such banal ways, but I feel like I also wanted to maybe push out of that because I felt it was so trendy that I needed it to make sense in my work. So I was not just using it to use it. But one of the ideas that I'm looking through for this case is using organic material, because at the same time, when I was doing one of the pieces that I showed here near the greenhouses at Penn, I saw that they have huge compost bins where they put all these plants that they usually take away when the winter comes. And so it's a very enticing object sculpturally. I was very I really it was very evocative for me. So now I'm thinking through that with this research of this case in particular, and also with organic material. And I feel that was also something that was pushed and evidenced in one of the in one of the classes that I took at Penn, which was biodesign with Orkan. But at the same time, I will say, I feel that for me, at least, it only comes through to the extent of plants, because like working with other living organisms, I don't feel I have the morale, I don't know, the ethics of it becomes, I guess, tricky, but I feel the ethics of artists also very tricky.
Definitely. I guess we have time for one more question if anyone has one. Questions or comments?
I appreciate how sensitive you are to plants. I'll just quickly say, in the sense of, I think that in this work, you're dealing with like the taxonomy of the colonial project of categorizing plants. And I like how you're destroying that image as opposed to the plant itself. So there's a sense of like sensitivity to perhaps the plant itself and sensitivity to the image and the colonialized image of the plant. So I really appreciate that.
That's a good point. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, Vale.
Hola.
Sorry, I arrived so late. I hope you didn't speak about what I'm going to ask you yet, but I really like this picture that you're showing right now. So I am thinking about what you do when you have like this ruin of the work. You just clean it and I don't know, or you think about this as a work too, because I imagine seeing this I don't know, at a museum, and I would really like it as a work of art in itself. So I don't know if you think about that.
You mean, sorry, you would like it like just the picture or the whole ruin?
The whole room, like in real, like some kind of sculptural thing or installation. I don't know. It's really I imagine I will feel really curious about this, and I don't know, it's really interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming too. Yeah, well, yes, after this I clean it. I also had to leave the space. But yeah, I guess your question makes me think of two things that we've been discussing and that I still feel I have unresolved. Which is one, when does this piece start and when does it end? Like when if you like come thinking of the running fountain, like if you come at the beginning or if you come in the middle or if you come when it's totally dissolved, those are different stages of the work and how it is perceived. And how do you control that? And when is the work happening? Is it in the middle? Is it in the end? Is it at the beginning? And I feel I don't have a definite answer. I would say like in all of those stages, it happens. And another thing that I was thinking was the question of how do you say when you register a performance, about the question of how do you show a performance? How do you register a performance? I guess like thinking And that's what I was thinking, like if you just show the picture of it, if you show the video of it, document. Yes, thank you, Roxana. The question about documentation. If I show a video of the piece, thinking also about its longer life. If I show a video, if it's only a picture, if it's nothing. And I guess I also have it unresolved. And for me, I've tried video and I feel it always falls short. I haven't tried photo. For me, photo serves more of a documentation of the process, but not the actual piece. And I guess that's also always the question of documentation. Yeah. I guess for me, and again, when you're saying if you were to see this crumbled fountain just displayed, that would be enough. And I guess I haven't even thought about that, because for me it's I'm so like set in the way of making it that for me it has to be like throughout the dissolution and people coming and going. But I think it's interesting to think, maybe stretch, to think it more of a practice and thinking it more of a, what if one piece is just a crumbled structure? What if other piece is just a photo? What if other piece is the whole process of dissolution? And I guess that's also the richness of the research in itself, for me at least, and sort of the drive of like keep going with the research as well. Yeah, I don't know if that sort of answered a little bit, or maybe I was just projecting.
Thank you so much, Valentina. This was a really amazing presentation. I loved seeing your work, and I also love the discussion we had tonight. So thank you for doing this, and thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks everyone for coming, and thank you, Grizzly, for giving me the space. Like, you can't imagine how much it helped me, and also thank you, Angela, for having me tonight.
Of course, my pleasure.
Thank you, Valentina.
Thanks.
All right, have a great night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Buenas noches.